Excellent. So before we jump into the Q&A, I wanted to share my personal story of how I became aware of the Master the Media course, and really the reason why I felt so passionate about asking Amy and Aaron to come on today. I received an email about the free webinar that they were offering for their course. And this email, you know, we talk a lot in our group, and we talk about how do we market. And they did an amazing job of really that hook. They told me they were going to teach me how to get my name into the media. And they were going to give me 5 tips, and that I could make an income through media work. And as a new private practice dietitian, this interested me. So of course I clicked. It was a free webinar, and I registered. The webinar date came up. I got all of those nice notifications, the reminders to show up. I attended their webinar, and they delivered. And I think as I've done a lot of research about webinars to tackle for my own use, that the key is to building that relationship and showing that you're credible to, you know, produce perhaps a purchase of a paid item, is you need to deliver a lot of value. And during the webinar, they did. They delivered to me an incredible amount of actionable things I could do today to get my name out into the media. And it didn't end there. Afterwards, I received, you know, a robust series of emails following up about the course that they offered. And during the webinar, they tackled that really challenging, how do I sell my product, my paid product? How do I make sure that people know that there's more resources available? So after the webinar ended, I thought, wow, these girls, you know, these colleagues of mine really are experts. Would they be willing to share what they know? And so that was the reason that I reached out, and they graciously agreed to come on and answer my burning questions. And rather than me just taking that information, I decided to create this learning series where we can have these conversations together and really share our wisdom as a profession. And so that's what we're going to tackle today. It's kind of my personal story of how I came to know Amy and Aaron. So great. So let's dive in. First and foremost, you know, how did you really decide? So there's many different ways, you know, when we offer a course. How do you connect with your customers? How did you say, yep, webinar, this is the approach we want to take to market Master the Media? Talk to us about that decision.
Sure. So, Amy, you want me to jump in there first? Okay. All right. So I think one of the compelling things about webinars, and you mentioned yourself as you've attended some and whatnot, I find myself when I'm looking at researching, let's say I want a product or whatnot, I might go to a web page and read, but I don't actually do anything. I say, oh, that sounds great, but I don't actually purchase. But then I've found myself getting emails or seeing Facebook ads for content that sounds really exciting to learn about for a free webinar. And always I know there's going to be a sales pitch at the end, and I don't always buy the product, but I have found that the products I have bought have always been as a result of a webinar, because during the webinar, I really can get the style of how that person educates. You know, on a website, on a flat piece of paper, in an email, you don't really get necessarily their style or how the approach is going to be. When you see a webinar and you really get in that level of trust and you start to really feel like this person knows what they're talking about, you trust them more and you're more apt to buy from them. So because I had that experience, I really thought webinars would be our best option as far as to go ahead and try to sell the course that way. So I think that was the biggest thing, is just knowing it converted for myself. For our audience as well.
Yeah. Amy, anything else to add?
Yeah, I think I think Aaron brought up really great points, and I also think just getting that free information out there. You know, you want to, like you said, you want to give something and then have people feel like they want more so that they buy your product. And so I think a lot of people, when they're stepping into the webinar land, you know, Aaron and I watched a lot of webinars to research, and we saw some really awesome ones. But, you know, there's different degrees of how much free information you're giving. And I think some people might be afraid to over deliver, but I think it's really important to give a good amount and then say, we have so much more to offer. We just, you know, touch the tip of the iceberg, and there's so much more information in our course. And then jump into that sales pitch at the end, but spend a good majority of the webinar, you know, pitch talking about that free information. So that was really something that we thought was valuable, and that's one of the reasons why we did the webinar.
Nice. Awesome. So did you have, I mean, you have an excellent background in the media and speaking. Did you have any, fears or anxieties? What held you back? Was there anything that gave you pause when you said, yes, let's proceed with the webinar?
Yeah, I'll jump in if that's okay, Erin.
Sure.
So I think my greatest fear with doing anything technical is what's possibly going to go wrong with, is the internet going to go out, or are you not going to be able to hear us, or are the slides not going to work? So that was my biggest anxiety. But we actually, of course, we wanted to have a workaround for that. So every time we do a webinar, we hire a virtual assistant who does a run through with us. Okay. And she's there during the webinar itself. So, about a few days before the webinar, she jumps on the phone with us. We do kind of just a test with our webinar software to make sure everything's good. She gives us really helpful tips. Erin's usually the one who has everything anchored to her computer. So she tells Erin, make sure you have an internet wire to plug into your computer just in case the wireless goes out, just little things like that. I have a backup of the slides in case anything on her end stops working. We all have each other's phone numbers. We can text each other if something goes wrong. But really, it's just peace of mind. Nothing's actually ever gone wrong. But our virtual assistant also is just there during the webinar itself, because we have enough on our plate to run the webinar. We don't want to have to worry if someone writes in and says, I can't hear you, I can't, see the slides. So the virtual assistant is there to manage all the technical problems that come up and just make sure that people can hear everything. She also records it for us, so we don't have to worry about that. And then we're able to send a replay after the fact to anyone who wasn't able to make the webinar.
Excellent. I think the thing what's coming out from that statement is the amount of planning that goes in, that you're really planning for every possible situation, and that it isn't plug and play. There's a lot of work that has to happen, and really that you have somebody, someone helping you, that you aren't just flying solo, managing the technology during the actual webinar. So that's, I think, an excellent point that, I don't know that everybody realizes that when people who are running webinars have a technology person at their side, so that they can focus on, delivering the content. So we touched a little bit on your marketing approach, but I'm sure, as a spokes of a wheel, that this webinar that, I attended and that you offer is one of many ways that you market Master the Media. Can you tell us a little bit more about your overall marketing approach?
Yeah, sure. So, the webinar is a big part of it because people are going to be more likely to register for something free that they get value out of. And as Amy mentioned, it's really about over delivering, because if they're like, wow, you're giving all this away for free, what does the paid version look like? You're going to get that benefit. So we definitely market the webinar, and by having that free webinar, it really helps to build your email list. And so then once you've done it once, those same people, even people that have attended the webinar prior, now they're part of your email list. So you can have different levels of your email list. And when you start to, we open enrollment a few times a year. So the course isn't always available. It's open right now, but it'll end on December 27th. So, those people that maybe didn't take advantage or didn't enroll, doesn't mean that they're not thinking about it. So we try to make sure that we incorporate all of that list when we go and we offer another webinar. But on top of it, with developing the website and launching at the end of the summer, we also have free opt-ins there. So we have free resource materials for people who want to get into freelance writing or broadcast or learn how to ace an interview. So somebody can find us that way. They can find us through social media posts. We've been starting to do some Facebook ads. So all of those things are directing traffic back to the website, building that email list, and then ideally we'll start to offer additional content throughout the year, even when the course isn't open, to keep them engaged and trusting us, so that when the course launches, they're going to be excited.
Awesome. Amy, anything else before we?
Yeah, I would just also add, in addition to everything Erin said, we offer bonuses here and there. Right now, we had an early bird sale of $100 off, encouraging people to act fast. During the webinar, it lasted for a little less than a week. We had a flash sale for Cyber Monday. Another, it was also $100 off, and so we have things like that to kind of encourage sales along the way.
Oh, and I forgot too, we did Fancy marketing, right, Amy?
Oh, yeah.
So we even have little cards made up for Fancy, and we're talking to dietitians that might be interested and have like a special coupon savings for them too. So in-person marketing as well, because then they were able to ask us more questions.
Oh.
Yeah, so we made people, they feel special. They're getting a special discount code or card that other people might not be getting. So
that makes complete sense. I think one though common theme, that you have kind of this cohesive marketing strategy. Talk to me about, your background in marketing, or was it trial and error? How did you come up with a really formal plan? Tell me more about this, your marketing approach in general.
Yeah, I can jump in. So our formal plan is really Erin and I saying, hey, Erin, I saw this thing the other day and I think it's a good idea because someone else was doing it and it looked cool. Or, how about we make these cards because we're going to Fancy? She was like, oh, we should do a flash sale for Cyber Monday. It's really, we have a plan, but it's very fly by the seat of our pants, where if something seems like a good idea, we'll add it to our plan, because why not? We've tried different things. The first couple times we did the webinar, we offered different bonuses than we offered the previous time, and we're kind of playing around to see if it makes a difference in sales or if sales are just the same. So I think a lot of it's just kind of seeing what other people are doing, seeing what kind of bonuses people are offering and what we want to change, and a lot of it's just really trial and error.
Yeah. And I'll just add to that, because like Amy said, a lot of it's trial and error. I think in the past, I have a little bit of experience trying to run webinars and sell things to consumer audiences for my private practice. And I was noticing when I was trying to learn that there was a lot more opportunity with more business to business versus business to consumer. Not to say that those can't be successful too, but when we had this idea that was really specifically marketed to dietitians who wanted to launch their careers, I feel like that was an even better hook, and just a more, not to say that a consumer market isn't willing to buy, but it's just a market where there's a return on investment quicker versus just a return on health, which we all know is important, but not necessarily the consumer. Right. So that was helpful too. And then training wise, neither one of us have like a business background, but really, really great resources too. If you look at people like Amy Porterfield, she runs webinars that convert. A lot of free resources there too. And there's a lot of people like David Seitlin Gardland. There's a lot of different websites you can go and do their free webinars, not necessarily buy their materials, but learn a lot even from their free webinars.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing what you found to be useful. So the question, how much time? So the reality of, I'm going to spend the next 3 days and I'm going to launch this fantastic webinar. How long does it take to really put together the type, as I talked about, how amazed I was at your webinar. How long did it take to put that together?
It takes a while, right, Amy? It takes a lot longer. Longer than you would expect. The actual webinar piece, the slides, that's like the last thing. That like really didn't take very long. That to me is the surprising thing, because that's what you really think when you're putting a webinar together. All you're really worried about is the webinar and the sales pitch. That's like 1/10 of the time. It's everything else. I know it's really depressing. It's like putting together your marketing strategy, getting all the technology, building the email list, writing the emails, because you have to write the emails to market. Then you have to write the emails to sale after, tracking that, doing, opt-ins to get people to register, all those things, all that marketing takes a long time. Now, once we did it the first time, we always tweak it moving forward, but at least we have a big part of it done. And then on top of it, we actually had to build the course to have something to sell. So there was a lot, right, Amy?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I think was a good idea we did, so we actually did the webinar last. So we actually created the course, all of the modules. We have 35 modules now. We started with 30. So the first time we did the webinar, we had created all of that. And by then we already had a look and feel for our brand, which that takes time to kind of figure out what you want your fonts to be, what you want your colors to be. So we figured we had a logo made. So we figured out all of that when we made the course, which I think that took the whole month of January and like half of February, right? And that's pretty much So once we did that, like Erin said, jumping into creating the webinar was kind of like, okay, we already have our slides, logo, font, colors. We already know what we want to tell people. So that was really, like Erin said, the easy part. And now I'd say most of our time with the webinar goes into setting it up, marketing, following up, this time around, we tried something different. We hired someone to help us with Facebook ads to really add another marketing strategy to the landscape. And, even coordinating all of that, just like, that sounds so easy. We have someone to help us, but finding the person, going back and forth and deciding what you want your budget to be, just all those little things really add up to quite a bit of time, but it's absolutely worth it.
I always think it's interesting. Someone who does something well makes it look so easy, when in reality, you have no idea how much. The reason it looks easy is because they spent an incredible amount of time preparing to execute well. So all of the things you're talking about, make it feel a little intimidating, but also for people who are kind of type A or organized, know that if you spend the time up front, you can execute, a good, high quality webinar to accompany your course or another product that you have. So you talked about using, marketing the webinar, and you talked about using Facebook ads this time. Do you want to give any more insight into how you made that decision, or, what were the thoughts? Because I think some people are always, should I do advertising on Facebook? Tell us a little bit more about that decision.
Do you want me to take that one, Amy?
Yeah, go ahead.
So I think the thought was behind it. So Facebook ads can definitely be beneficial, but you have to do them right. You don't want to just spend money and then not see a return on investment. So we had initially on our first or second launch, I think it was our first launch, we tried just like gotten our feet wet with it, but we really didn't know exactly what we were doing. We didn't know how to set the audiences right. So we were spending money, but really not seeing any conversion at all. So it was really trying to find somebody that could help us. And we found a person that really understands our audience, has worked with our audience before. So that felt like a good fit. We interviewed a few people. Some felt better than others. But the person that really understood our audience was great, because then she was able to really fine tune that audience on Facebook. And this is the first time we've done it. Actually, I think this is the first time we have the little pixel. I don't know exactly how it goes, but there's something that we can track the conversions. So this is the first time we'll actually see if it's benefiting us. And then ideally, as you build more and more, then you can even make these lookalike audiences and different things to target more people. But for now, dietitians are a smaller market, so there's only so much you can do. And we didn't want to just keep advertising to the same Facebook groups and the same listserv and not reach the other people. So we were hoping we could reach other people that we might have been missing through the Facebook ads.
Awesome.
Yeah, and I will also add that, so when we started all of this, when we created the course, when we did our first few webinars, we didn't have an official Master the Media website. So we waited until, we didn't want to invest. We were investing, quite a bit, but we didn't want to go crazy. So we kind of wanted to pace ourselves. So that was something that Erin and I put together. We actually hired someone to put together our website for us a couple of months ago. And in that process, we decided to create additional opt-ins. So we started off with one opt-in on how to become a successful freelance writer. And so in our, part of our marketing campaign is really happening all year long, even when the webinars are not happening. We created 3 additional opt-ins. So now we have 4 free opt-ins on our website. They're free tip sheets. So, up to 10 tips, really high value tips on broadcasts, pitching, freelance writing. So that's kind of our continual soft marketing. It's just able to come to the website, get their free tips, they're getting a lot of value, and they just happen to be added to our list in the process.
Yes, I will definitely be putting a link to those tip sheets, because as I was browsing your website earlier, I saw them. I was like, oh my gosh, I want these free tip sheets. So again, I think those, that's another topic, but the use of lead magnets and, email, growing your email list. But you talked about pixels, and you talked about, statistics. How did you have an approach to being data driven as far as the effectiveness of the webinar? You talk about Facebook ads, you will have data soon, but how did you, some webinar programs allow you to, track engagement, or I don't have a lot of experience with webinars. So tell me about any data that you used to say, was it successful?
Do you want me to take that one, Aim? Okay, so I do the tech side of setting up the GoToWebinar. We use GoToWebinar. Okay. So since I have the hardwire connection for the wireless, it made sense that I run the GoToWebinar account. So when we run the webinar, it's plugged in. GoToWebinar, it costs a little more than some other services, but I personally think it's worth it because they give you really great reports. So you can see every registrant, you can see who attended, who didn't attend. You can also see how long they attended, the questions they asked. You can actually see their engagement. So what's really cool is, I didn't know this until we started doing webinars, and now I feel guilty, is if you're watching it and you put the screen behind, like let's say you pull up your email during it, it shows you on GoToWebinar. Yeah. So now I'm like all paranoid. But you can see how many people were actually engaged and had your primary screen, or who was like checking their email at the same time. So it's really interesting feedback. And then from there, you can look at when certain people buy the course, you can go back and say, oh, was that person who was engaged attended or didn't attend? So you know, were they buying based on our emails? Were they buying based on attending the webinar?
Wow.
Yeah. And the other thing is, we after the webinar goes live, we offer the replay a few days later, and so we have that on a private YouTube link where we can see how many people watched it, so you get some statistics that way. We also use MailChimp to send our emails, so we can see the open rate, you know, which marketing email was successful, or you know, did that bonus $100 off on Cyber Monday really get people's attention, or, you know, or did they miss that email completely? Then we can tell with the open rates.
Okay, so you have a number of different, both the webinar, email, but you know that there are a lot of statistics and data that we need to be looking at to say, are the investments that I'm making, is the time that I'm spending. Did you see over the course, you know, you only launched your Master the Media course, you know, it's not available all the time. Did you see a difference with the subsequent launches, I guess? Were you tracking differences over time?
Yeah. So do you want me to jump in, Erin?
Sure.
Yeah. So I think that's a really good question because, you know, so far we've offered the course at different times of the year. So we have seen a difference. We don't know, you know, I think next year we'll be able to say where there's differences because people know us better. They're getting our emails. Is it the time of year? You know, is January a better business time versus December? Or do they want to ask for this for a holiday gift? You know, who knows? So we're still figuring all of that out. We have seen a nice gradual climb in how many people are enrolling each time we open enrollment. But again, that's possibly due to our list size growing or word of mouth getting out there. So, you know, only time will tell what all of this data means.
Absolutely. I think it's easy to get bogged down by, you know, looking at, you know, checking your campaign effectiveness and really being, using your time wisely and not just looking at it for the sake of, you know, looking at your, you know, the statistics are there. So how much time should we be spending, you know, reviewing that information and trying to be, you know, developing high value content will bring, rather than spending that inordinate amount of time, you know, looking at, you know, how do you balance bringing the value, you know, putting the value out first, and then, you know, then you're going to see the results down the line.
Absolutely. And this time, this time we have a longer open enrollment period. Usually we do a little less than 2 weeks. And this time around we open enrollment right before Fancy. And now we're closing it right after the holidays on December 27th. So it's also an experiment to see, are we getting more people? We actually have gotten a few more than normal this time, but we'll see if it's a significant amount or not. Registration closes. Yeah,
I noticed your website has like the countdown bar on it. Yes. That's really telling people, you know, and I think that sense of urgency that, you know, you need to act. I think another, you know, for another discussion, the whole having your course open year round versus only offering it, you know, at a certain times, you know, there's always, you know, you can hear different sides of that. So you talked about GoToWebinar. Did you look at other platforms? How did you go? You know, I feel like a lot of people start their search, you know, Googling webinar platforms. How did you choose GoToWebinar, and what was that decision process like for you?
Sure. Amy, you want me to tackle that?
Yeah, I think because you were the one who knew about GoToWebinar, so that makes sense.
Sure. So there's a lot of different platforms out there. I took that Amy Porterfield course, the Webinars That Convert, and she goes through quite a lot of the different types of platforms out there. A lot of them have pros and cons. Some are cheaper than others. Some offer more data points. the one, and I've looked at Facebook groups, I looked at reviews, the one that time and time again people kept saying didn't have technical glitches was GoToWebinar. So some of them have cooler features, but to me the best thing was that we stayed on air. We didn't lose anybody, we didn't go black, no one could hear us. I mean, the whole point, you put so much effort into it. If no one's going to see it or your recording's lost, that would be horrible. So I'd rather spend a little bit more and have it just maybe not as pretty as some of these other ones, but know that it's going to work for most people and most people are going to be able to access it. And, knock on wood, we really haven't had too many tech glitches. My mute button got frozen on our last one, but that wasn't a GoToWebinar thing. That was my microphone. But other than that, it's been working really good. And even our VA who helps us really likes GoToWebinar. So that's kind of what helped make our decision.
Yeah, it's interesting that you pointed out that you took Amy Porterfield's course. That's not the first time I've heard the value of her course. So, you mentioned though that in the past, we were talking earlier that she's a great, resource. And I think you've spoken about your own experience of, selling more now that you've opened the course. That one thing, Amy Porterfield consistently delivers is a lot of value. And I think that builds, she has great products. So I think it's a good point that you invested in your own knowledge with a paid product so that you could be successful. And that was an investment. Would you say, we have, overall, what was that one of the most important things that you did, or overall, what was that tool you think that helped you really create the success of that webinar?
Yeah, I think for me, that was huge, because I think one of the things being a business owner and wanting to build your business, you can't do everything on your own and you have to learn from others. And so, researching different things out there, that was really, really beneficial. I mean, one thing I would love to learn myself is something like, say, Facebook ads, but it's just, there's only so much time, and we found someone really great now, right? that helps us. So I would say, that program, learning the sales side of it, because you mentioned that at the top too. How do you fit in that sales without being too pushy, but without, being nervous about it? And that was really, really great guidance. And then a lot of it is trial and error on our part, just practicing it. And I have to say too, being two people together, Amy and I work really well together, but it's also really, really nice to have somebody to bounce ideas back from, to tell me if I'm talking too fast or rambling on. It's nice to ask somebody for honest feedback versus somebody you're trying to sell to.
Yeah, I think just to bounce off of what Erin said, having a business partner in this kind of a business it's really, really helpful. I know it's not possible for everyone. But I think we really balance each other's strengths, and also just having two people, when we did our email marketing the last time around, it's like, okay, I'll write the emails, and how about you schedule them? Because those are both two very significant chunks of time, which no one might not realize. And just, a lot of things like that we're able to divide and conquer. One other resource that was really useful to us that I want to mention was Canva. And some people, I think, don't know this. There's actually a presentation tool on Canva that has slides that you can use for PowerPoint presentations. So when we were jumping into this, I think the overwhelming thing at the initial point was, how do we create all of these amazing looking slides for our webinar and our course and have time to do all of that? And actually Canva saved us a ton of time. Once we figured out a look and feel, we found a template in Canva that mirrored that, and now we use it as our template. We actually brought on affiliate instructors for our course, and guest instructors for our course, and we gave them the templates just to have that consistent look along, with their presentations.
Thank you for bringing up Canva as a resource. I actually wasn't aware that they had those presentation templates. I use it routinely, but I didn't know that, so thank you. As we kind of wrap up, last question is there one thing you wish you would have known, kind of that one thing that if you could tell another dietitian who's kind of embarking on webinars, looking back, that you would want to share?
Yeah, Erin, do you want me to jump in first?
Sure.
I think the major thing for me was just that the webinar itself goes so fast, and there's only so much information you can pack in. So that has been a continual challenge, even if this time around, when we did our webinar, we had added 5 new modules. So we wanted to add a couple of slides telling people about those new modules and the new guest instructors we brought on, but talking about that adds, even a couple of minutes. So we had to talk about, okay, what slide or 2 slides do we want to cut out of the webinar? And, there's always information we're adding and cutting out. And I think it's just important to think about, everyone who signed up for this webinar set aside an hour of their time, not an hour and 5 minutes, not an hour and 10 minutes. So you want to make sure that there's enough time to deliver all that free information, but also to get to the sales pitch and, make sure that people are signing up for the course itself.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's such a good point, because there's so much you want to tell everybody, and you could go on and on because we're excited about the information. I think the one thing for me too is don't feel guilty that you have something to sell, because what you're selling, you wouldn't have created it if you didn't feel like it was adding value to someone. So it's something you're proud of. And I think the very first webinar we did, it wasn't that we were like hiding it, but it was just like, we're like, hey, here's our course, So then after we didn't get as many, millions of sales that we thought we would get in the first webinar, we said to each other, we really have to like kick it up a notch with the sales piece of it. And so we did the next webinar the next day, and we're just much more enthusiastic about it and got way more sales because we are enthusiastic about it. We shouldn't have to feel guilty about it. So I think you just take that guilt away. People are coming because they want this information. And even if they just want the free information, that's fine. But it's only benefiting them to let them know about something you think is really going to aid their business.
And actually, I want to add one more thing based on what you said, Erin, because that brought up one thing that, you said that time we did that, the second webinar was so much more successful in the sales. So it's really something that we figured out is every time we do a webinar, we run our webinar how many times? A lot now, but every time we do it, there's usually a few months lag. So, you might feel a little bit rusty. So we always do a practice run through so that the first time we're doing the webinar, we usually do back-to-back days. The first time isn't the first time. And so we get out any jitters or, oh, that wasn't enthusiastic enough talking to each other in the run through that no one else hears. And I think that run through is super, super important.
Oh, such an amazing point. So I thoroughly enjoyed our time together. I feel really inspired to look more deeply into utilizing a webinar, but also kind of have a healthy respect for the amount of work that it's going to take and to, develop and execute a webinar. And the resources you provided and the insight was incredibly valuable. So again, Amy and Erin have Master the Media online course, and you can find them at masterthemedia.co/course. And I will also have a link to their website, and definitely check out their course and their freebies that they have on their website. So again, thank you so much for joining, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you, Megan. Thanks
so much, Megan.
All right. Thanks.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.